Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Deacon Ron Lesjak, coordinator of the former Share food program in Kenosha. Welcome. Thanks for speaking with me today.
You're welcome.
What was the Share program?
Well, Share was a nonprofit program. It was with the 5 letters S-H-S-R-A. S-H-A-R-E, and it stood for Self-Help and Resource Exchange. It was a nonprofit program that was started in 1983 or so in San Diego by some deacons out there, and then we found it in Wisconsin here that it was a great idea to bring to Milwaukee. And so the deacons in Milwaukee got it going in 1984, 85.
Okay.
And so by the end of 1985, we brought it to Kenosha. And I was sort of became the coordinator when I brought it to the Kenosha Interfaith Organization or committee at that time.
You brought it to the council,
Right.
Interfaith Council, and what did you ask them for?
Well, I asked them if we would like to begin it here in Kenosha, and if there would be a possible churches that would like to be a part of it. And I believe that there are a few of them that were at that meeting. And so those, we got 3 pastors to help start the program. And one of them was Reverend Olin Arrington from Second Baptist, and there was Father Jerry Hessel from Latin American Center, and the other church is Reverend Ken Gelhaus from Emmanuel United Methodist.
Okay.
Those 3 helped begin the program here, or start selling the program to people.
Okay. So what specifically did the program do?
It offered a food package of about 20 items that were at that time. It was sold for $14, and it was, it just was put together with meats, potatoes, rice, beans, and all kinds of things. But as we were going to get into, the resource part of it was that if anybody could be of help to the program, obviously, and you had to have help. We needed to help people to bring it from Milwaukee to Kenosha. We had to empty the trucks that brought it back to Kenosha, and then set it up in their churches and their organizations so that it could be distributed to the people.
Okay, and when was this food distributed? What time of the month?
Well, it was always set up to be purchased in the first 2 or 3 weeks, but it was always set up to be distributed at the 3rd Saturday of the month, because most people ran out of money. Their Social Security or their payments that they had would run out by the last week of the month. So this was set up to help them make it through that last week so that they would have some food until their payment, their Social Security came in on the 1st day of the month or whatever it came. But it was a package that was, like I say, foods that they could use during the week, and so that was the way it looked at.
So it was a bridge.
Right, to fill the bridge, yes, very good word, to the 1st day of the month.
And so, did you need any money to start the program in Kenosha?
We did not need any money because it began with those 3 churches who would start selling it once we got an order blank from the warehouse in Milwaukee, or it was actually Butler, Wisconsin, and they sent us a list. They would start signing up people and could collect the $14 so that it was all the money was collected and sent in when the food was, after the food was picked up, and they paid for their food.
Okay. If this was to help people bridge a gap from when their money ran out until they would get their next Social Security payment or food stamps, why did you charge?
Well, it's still, you had to pay for the food. The foods were warehouse food that came from a warehouse, but we still had to pay for the work of the workers at the warehouse in Milwaukee, and we had to pay for some of the transportation of the food that came to the Milwaukee warehouse. We, and the story will go as we go here, in Kenosha, we had a beautiful program that I organized with the churches as well as transportation companies
Okay.
to get the food for sent to Kenosha for free.
Okay, so you needed transportation, which means you had to have a big enough truck
Right.
to bring whatever food was ordered back to Kenosha for distribution.
Right.
How did you get the transportation that was necessary every month?
Well, because of being a deacon and knowing some of the people in our churches and other churches, we arranged to get free transportation, as we did the first time we had it. Was John and Bob Standard there on 75th and 39th Avenue, right next to my church there at St. Mary's. But those that John and Bob offered 3 U-Haul trucks the first time to go up to Milwaukee to pick up the first 90 orders, I think, that were ready to be picked up for those 3 churches. And so we had 3 drivers that we didn't, from our program, some of us that we got from the churches or from, I think Reverend Arrington and Pastor Jerry Hessel and myself all drove these U-Hauls up to Milwaukee the first time. And so it was really a delight to go. And we actually went to the Milwaukee docks that first time and picked up the food. And we ended up only with needing 2 trucks because we filled up one too much. And the other truck we filled up half, and then one truck was totally empty. So that was our first distribution that we
And
brought
how
back.
did you deal with the next distribution and the following distributions?
Okay, well, that's where we started looking for companies to help with the transport. And it was really, the one of them is that we went with Chrysler, or American Motors at that time, Chrysler, and we went with Local 72, started helping with it. And we had a distribution out of Local 72 some of the first times as well to help with it. So that was like the 4th program that helped with it besides those first 3. And so we had it there, and Chrysler Transportation went up for 2 or 3 times to Milwaukee to bring it back to Local 72.
Okay. And what became the standard way of doing it, of getting the food back here?
Well, the standard way of doing it was I met with 3, 4 very helpful guys at that time. And it started with Dave Nelson and his brothers and his sons, which were out of Bain Nelson, Otto Nelson, and then Dave Nelson moving in storage. And so all of those brothers, along with Dad, David, and got the truckings to do it for free, for a donation each month. And so that's what started it with those 3. I know Scotty Kutzler jumped in as we went along. They got him to help. And we continued with KC Cartage and Super Value Transport. Somebody from Super Value, and we got them to help. So we had about 7 trucks that either went once a year or twice a year. And I'll never forget the one company that I think is one of the Otto Nelson guys that said he never goes hunting during November. So he said he'd always drive in November to pick up the Thanksgiving Day load. So that's what happened. It was that we continued to have a donated, for all the 27 years of share in Kenosha, we had free transportation to pick up the food in Milwaukee and bring it back.
How important was the free transportation of that food?
Oh, that was so important. It was so vital because it would have raised the rate, the amount of money that we had. Instead of maybe a $14 package, we would have had to add $2 to the package to make it more expensive. And we didn't want to do that. That was my goal as I was working with the program. I wanted to keep that price, and it actually did. The 3rd or 4th year, the food package went down to $12 for the the different things that we got in that a month. Correct.
Okay. And Kenosha was unique in that respect around Wisconsin?
Very unique. We were the only one anywhere in the United States that had donated trucking. And it was such a blessing that we had here in Kenosha, but especially from those truckers that said, oh yeah, we'll participate in that. It's a great idea for them. Because that was the part of the share resource exchange, the RE of the title, that they brought their resources of having a truck, their truck drivers, that they would not have to pay it. Well, they may have paid their truck drivers, but that was totally under the carpet, which I never heard about, because some of them donated their time to drive up to Milwaukee and back that Saturday morning, because it was always 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning that the truck went up to a Milwaukee warehouse in Butler, in Milwaukee, and to pick up that food and brought it back.
And how far of a trip was that then?
That's a good 50 miles up, as I remember taking the mileage. And so it was a 50 miles up and 50 miles back that it was,
At 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
At
So
3
it was-
o'clock, and it usually came back. Well, you had to have some time to fill the truck up, either with the forklifts or with walking pallet movers that we would move the food into after we made up a pallet for each of the host sites that was holding the share food in Kenosha, because we had to have a pallet for each site that we would put onto the truck. So if we only had, as we grew into almost 13 sites or 14 sites by the time the 27 years were over. So we had to have pallets for each one of those host sites, and we would, especially the guys that went up, and we had some very wonderful guys that went up to Milwaukee, as I can say, Al Blazavir, John Hoffman, and I'm not sure if Carl went, and myself,
No.
and then we went up to Milwaukee and made up these pallets. We palletized them with plastic, and then we had to have a forklift truck put them on our truck and be brought back. But then we got back to Kenosha, we had to have some help to unload. So that was help, were the people who bought the truck, helped unload the trucks as well, as we were only doing it.
The distribution was on what day of the week?
The third Saturday of the month.
Saturday,
Always
and
the
then-
third Saturday.
When did you or others for Kenosha go up and palletize this food?
As I said, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning.
No. That's when the truck brought the food back.
Right.
But in order to put the food on pallets so the truck could pick them up on Saturday,
Right.
what day of the week did you go to make the pallets up?
It was done at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We always went up on Saturday morning and made up the pallets, and then those were put on the truck and brought back. And so then they were unloaded by people at each site. And for a while, it was only that the truck would stop at each site. That was really not a good thing to happen. We were really, again, blessed with another great company called Laminated Products that, as I think they drove one of the trucks as well, but Laminated offered their warehouse where we could bring the big transportation, the big 19-wheeler, 18-wheeler semi to Laminated Products. It was unloaded by a forklift truck, and then the little trucks from each host site came along either with a pickup truck or a van, and they took their food back to their host site. But that was a blessing to have Laminated Products there for, I bet you, over 20 years that we had for distributing the food when it came back from Milwaukee.
Okay, and do you remember the number of total orders that would come from Kenosha and Kenosha County?
Well,
on a
as it
monthly
grew, I
basis?
mean, as I said, I think the first time was the 3 churches that had it for about 90, because I remember their story or the picture in the Kenosha News was that people were lined up the streets around Emmanuel United Methodist around the whole block to help distribute the food of the 90 that I think they bought that, or the 300 they brought as it went along. They got it to 300 units at that place as it went along, and so it was it was really difficult for them in the snow. That was a big winter time too, that we had that big distribution for them. But otherwise it grew as we go. You know, we grew from, as I said, probably the 90 the first time to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 orders that were put on, you know, with the 8 or 9 or 12 host sites that started into it, you know, after those first 3, along with Local 72. So Local 72 was about the 4th, and if we want to keep going into all the other host sites, do we want to get to that? But to say that we went, and St. Andrew's Episcopal was one of them, Trinity Lutheran and St. Mary's Catholic went together because they were 1 block apart, and so we collaborated together there. And but then we had St. Vincent de Paul's store, or where their office was, or their place was, and we had Salvation Army. We had St. John's Lutheran, which is on the north side. We had Lord of Life. We had Bethlehem Temple, All Nations Pentecostal. Then it started later on. It went all the way out to Westosha Senior Citizen Center. And then I heard that we also, I didn't realize it, but we had it at Boys and Girls Club for a while, and as well as Salvation Army. So those were, I hope I haven't forgotten any of them, but those are the major ones that were involved in the SHARE program throughout the years.
Okay, and when did the program end?
It ended in 2012, May of 2012.
And why?
It ended because the transportation costs, because Wisconsin was selling it all the way to northern cities, the transportation to take it up to, for instance, Green Bay or any one of the Eagle River or Iron Mountain, those all cost a lot of money for their transportation costs. So that was really, the program could not afford to pay those transportation costs. So those poor sites had to pay more for their loads.
Because all of the food went to Milwaukee and then was distributed out to the cities that had their host sites there.
Whatever warehouse was selling the food to share, which they bought either at a discounted price or a donated price, that was where it all came to, the warehouse there in Butler, Wisconsin, and that's where it was distributed. But it would be, because even then we were paying possibly that what I don't know, who, the organizers of the St. Milwaukee Share program, what they were paying for the food to get it to be at that warehouse. So it could have been donated, it could have cost a small amount of money, but most of the meats were still good. There weren't anything that was not, say the dated label was way past any time. Normally it was really close, but yet it was still all the cans of food that we would get, the fresh vegetables, the fresh fruits, and then all the other things that were a part of it. We always had some chicken, we always had some sausage or pork, pork patties or chicken thighs, or all of those kinds of foods, along with, we always had some rice and some pasta and maybe some beans in the original days, because it really was a selling point for so many people of all the different races that participated in, because it was open to all. It was never a restriction on anybody that they could not participate in.
So it wasn't based on income or need, it was open to anyone.
Correct. There was no basis on it. If you had your $12 or $14, you could buy share. You could buy two if you had a bigger family, and so people did that. They always, they bought two packages instead of just one. But it was a wonderful stopgap for the hunger that was going on any time of this past 30 years, and continues on with, there's still the hunger that's still going on in our.
Okay, and what took its place?
Well, I just was thinking about it. Some of the places that obviously are our food pantries, God's Kitchen nowadays downtown is helping very much with offering some food uptown their area, but it was the food pantries of St. Vincent, Shalom Center. That's another place that also distributed. I didn't mention, but I mean, we had Salvation Army's pantries now today, and St. Vincent de Paul pantries, and
Sharing Center
out in county, as well as the Shalom Center has a big distributing time with their pantry. So some of those are taking care of it as best that they can for the poor or the ones that are in need of food.
Okay, and going through the years of Share and seeing the number of people ordering the food and the fact that it ended, do you see that the same food need exists today?
Oh, it certainly does. I mean, anybody on a minimum wage or a little over minimum wage, which not many companies are paying over minimum wage, they don't make enough to get the food that they need. I meet so many people that are just like, well, I've got to go to the food pantries to get some food to make it through the month. So there are so many that are still, using or could use a program such as ours, which we don't have anything. I don't think there's anything like it anymore in our community here. Just the food pantries, Shalom Center, Sharing Center, and all those places that are offering free food. And so I just, wish it could have been continued, but obviously we were the only ones in the United States that had that donated trucking, which was a blessing that we had for all of our Kenosha truckers, companies that participated in it. It was nothing better than the blessing we received from those trucking companies to take care of our share food here in Kenosha. So,
is there anything else you can think of regarding the Share program that we haven't touched on?
Well, I mean, just to know how those trucking companies had to go in some of the winter storms that they had. I mean, what they accomplished was unbelievable. The stories, there are a couple of Kenosha news stories that had, like Jeff Nelson went up the day of a snowstorm, and they basically barely made it safely. Because when I went up with a trucking one time, I rode up a truck when it's empty, and when you drive a semi-trailer at 18-wheelers, you are really bouncing around when it's empty. And so it was, and then it's hard to drive through snow. and it could be very dangerous. We never had a problem. That was one thing. We never had any accident with our truckers. But once that truck is loaded, then it's a nice smooth ride all the way back to Kenosha. But sometimes those truck drivers had to unload the food themselves because nobody showed up when they got there at the host site. That's another story that is such a great story to hear about how some of them had.
Think of a story or two, because if you're talking about a semi-load, you are up in the air and it's hard to get things 4.5 feet down.
Right, yeah, because I know
roadway.
like I said, the truck drivers ended up, like he said, after unloading 100, bags of potatoes that was in the process. It was. He said he had a good day working that hard to help with because the people didn't show up until he got there maybe at 5:30 when they were supposed to be there at 6 or 7 o'clock to unload the truck, and so they didn't want to wait around, so they ended up, unloading it.
What basically was the timing of the distribution on a Saturday? You said the truck went up at 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Right.
And the purpose, the truck was supposed to be back by?
As I said, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning that they were there for, to unload. Well, once it got laminated products involved, then it was good because we were all there. We would get there at 6 o'clock, unload and wait for those that were all the host sites that were coming. But before that, before we had laminated products, those were the first 4 or 5 years that we ended up having these problems of not having the what I would say the helpers, the resource people from the churches and organizations to help unload.
And generally you or the host sites tried to then deliver or distribute their food packages by like what time in the morning were they hopeful of getting it all done and out?
Oh, usually by 9 or 10 o'clock. And that was another thing we didn't talk about, was that how we would help with distribution. Either they would put each item on a table or the tables around the room, and everybody would go with their laundry basket or their bags, and somebody would be at each table and give them the 2 oranges, the 3 grapefruit or something like that, and the pile of 5 pounds of potatoes, the package of meats that would go into the basket. But that was sort of done by everybody offering to help unload and make up if they didn't get there for their own food, they would make up the package and set it aside and wait for the people to come. Hopefully they are all getting there by 8:30, 9 o'clock, or no later than 10 o'clock too.
And if the individuals didn't come by 9 o'clock, 9:15?
All I remember is we had their phone numbers on the sheets and we would call them. We really did. I think most people were, as we said, we knew these people needed that food package. It wasn't something like, oh, I don't want that food. They wanted that. They needed it. So sometimes they would forget, or sometimes for instance, sometimes they didn't have the transportation. I met one lady just recently who said, Deacon Ron, you always brought that food to my house since I didn't have a way of getting over to St. Mary's to pick it up. And so I mean, how many did that? I don't know. There were so many good people that were involved in each of these host sites that would do that kind of thing, would get it to the people, take a load, 3, 4, 5 of them in a load and drop it off their houses who couldn't get over there, even though they had signed up somewhere to buy the package for that month. But we always were of help to people to make sure they got their package each month, especially for Thanksgiving. At Thanksgiving, we always had 1 10-pound turkey in each load, each package that they had. Basically a Thanksgiving meal found right in there. The sweet potatoes, the stuffing mix, all the things in the beans, green beans that we'd have for a green bean salad, and whatever else that needed for a Thanksgiving meal. That was one thing that was really cool about the Sheriff Road program, that it went along, and it's still $14 for that turkey, the potatoes, all the things that would make up a Thanksgiving meal. So that was a great November meal.
And that was in addition to the normal package? I mean, if you...
Usually only at Thanksgiving we had that. It might have been.
But...
I might not remember that as better, but the most important part of Thanksgiving was we got that Thanksgiving meal distributed.
Right. But it was in addition to the regular package.
It could have been. But I think this was the basic idea for Thanksgiving, for that $14 was a Thanksgiving meal. So, yeah, it was, I say, excellent program for people. Everybody really was disappointed when it ended there in May of 2012, and actually had a huge distribution of trying to get rid of all the extra food. The order blank for that May was set up to give packages like a freezer package, which was $15, or a meat package that was another $10, or all these kind of things were distributed right there at the end of the program because they had all this extra food left over. And so you could have gone up to Milwaukee and picked it up, or at the last distribution, which was May of 2012, you could order that for May to pick that up for yourself. But all the extra food was available to be purchased, by them. It wasn't obviously distributed free. It's still, you had to buy the extra little things, which might have cost them $30, $35 when they said, well, I'll take that freezer package, I'll take that meat package, I'll take shrimp, there was 15, 16 shrimp in a box. All these kinds of extra things that hadn't been thought of before. So
regardless of little bumps and obstacles along the way over time,
right.
The people got their food if they picked it up or if somebody took it to their house.
Right. They always got their food, and everybody was always pleased with, I think, what they've got. I don't remember anybody ever complaining about how the package was or set up, because, and if they didn't want something, they left it. We would then distribute it to the pantries instead of, because that way it would be available to somebody else for free, rather than if they didn't like something, of the package. So that's the way it worked.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for talking with me about the SHARE program.
Yeah, well, it was a great program.